Hello, you marvelous soul. Yes, the dark night of the soul, that is the subject for today. It's a complex topic. Today, I'd like to shed light on this from a shamanic perspective, what it truly means, what actually happens there, the process at play. That's one aspect of it. And the other thing is how you can manage to go through this process of life, this transformation. I would describe it as important to handle well, what is important to consider, and maybe also how you can align yourself afterwards. And now we are already diving in. Yes, the dark night of the soul. This term is rather misleading to me because it should rather be called the dark night of the ego. Because the soul consciousness, who we truly are, is limitless, is immortal, is so powerful that we cannot comprehend it at all from the mind. And our ego, our self-awareness, is connected to our present manifestations, to the roles that we perceive ourselves to be in. And this is essentially what is in the process of dissolving. Because if we now believe that we are this self-awareness, this ego, and define ourselves through it, the role we play, the name you carry, or even the title you may have, that is then about to dissolve. And if you want to hold on to it, it may be because the mind defines itself by it. You might feel like you're going crazy, like everything is falling apart, which is indeed the case in that particular moment in time, at that precise point. But this is the self-awareness that is understood here. It's about the dark night of the ego, which is about to detach itself, to transform. And this is the standard state that occurs at regular intervals in the course of life's normal progression. And what happens during this dark night, which can last for several months or even up to years, depending on various factors that I will explain later, is that the soul wants to expand, essentially helping you as self-awareness to let go of the old life that no longer fits you. Even if you may still want to hold on to it, it helps you release the old, more or less forcing you to enter the new phase of life, to immerse into the new consciousness, which then also reshapes itself. I also like this image. It's similar to when you're about to pupate now. Yes, like a caterpillar starting to pupate. And at that moment, the caterpillar dies. At that moment, it lets go of everything it was before. And at this point, you discover yourself and commence transforming, starting to undergo a transformation. And this process, you absolutely cannot shortcut it. There are only two options, that is all. Once to resist and once to simply surrender to this process, to surrender oneself to it, yielding completely to its power. This either makes the process more enjoyable or speeds it up. And that is essentially what is happening there in a nutshell. Yes, and that sounds fantastic at the moment, but I have encountered this multiple times in my life. And I can assure you it is truly fear, panic, and emotions that you did not anticipate emerging. The life as I believed it works, or the role I have taken on, everything falls away, everything is somehow meaningless. It left such an impression on me, everything was simply in gray, so I could not enjoy life anymore. Everything was, regardless of external circumstances, I couldn't engage in life anymore. I was in a genuine state of limbo, and that's how I would describe it, like the caterpillar that forms a cocoon. Regardless of external events, you are focused on your inner journey. And this process of inner transformation initially must be embraced, not opposed. I understand it's extremely challenging at first, and if you envision now, I want to provide you with a visual. Envision the soul as if it were embarking on a marathon-like expedition, the soul that belongs to you personally. And your self-awareness that you believe you currently are is like a little child, and your soul wants to take this child along, wants to take it by the hand and lead it to these new shores, to these new goals where your soul wants to go. And then there are just two options. Either this child lies down on the ground and doesn't want to move anymore, yet the soul takes you by the hand and tries to gradually take you further along. Yes, then it naturally takes longer. You also have more fears, more resistance to it. Or you have the option to engage with this soul and go along, even if it might scare you in the beginning, even if it might feel too fast in the beginning. Yes, that you trust more in your soul consciousness, that this process is good for you, that the process wants to lead you to the point where your old self, whatever that was for you in your life, can detach, that it is a wonderful process, that you can now be something new, similar to the butterfly, which now arrives in such a depth within itself, in such a maturity as well, in such a connection to divinity, spirituality, or however you want to describe it, and thereby have a new perspective on life, a deeper connection to your own soul consciousness, because that is what I always describe as the call of the soul that may have been latent in your life. And now the soul is more vehement, guiding this transition process or transformation process more intensely. And that's how I would describe the whole process when the dark night of the ego has begun. And that is the mechanism. What effects can occur there? For one individual, it can be very detrimental, for another, less detrimental. The answer to that question depends on the existing relationship you have with your emotions and how well you understand and manage them. Whether or not you also carry intense emotions in your life, which may have accumulated or built up within you over time. This means that if you have had traumatic experiences now, for example, or if this dark night of the ego is also initiated, I have often experienced this in my guidance. That I have accompanied people who have just experienced the loss of a partner and then completely immersed themselves in this dark night of the ego and had to reorient themselves. And this process of detachment, this transformation, is indeed a longer phase, a time of introspection, a time of transformation, a time to look at emotions, not to resist them, not to run away from them. These are the mechanisms that we frequently learned, that when we have experienced intense emotions, we must still function and carry out our tasks effectively. We are anticipated to assume this or that position. And in this stage, we must certainly release all of our attachments. I've said this in another video, no need to do anything. No need to do anything. Let go of everything. Fully surrender yourself to this process and carefully observe and reflect upon these emotions. And that is the initial significant lever. I would characterize it as surrendering to it, not creating resistance, which is typical in the early stages because it can be intimidating or induce fear. At least it frightened me, because I am unaware of the extent to which it will manifest, and that you are acquiring the ability to assume a more detached perspective in this situation rather than associating yourself with it. I would characterize it as experiencing these emotions within oneself, and that is entirely acceptable. And they will also manifest, and when they do, observe them as an observer and do not delve too deeply into these heavy emotions that may pull you even deeper. That is the way I would describe it. If you initially learn to take on more of an observer role or stance, then it becomes much easier for you because you can then see and feel things differently. That is the way I would describe it. By maintaining an observer perspective, you can gain a new understanding and experience a shift in perception. That is the way I would describe it. And then you also give yourself the opportunity to perhaps look beyond, to see what this emotion is attempting to convey to you, what lesson you might acquire from it, not from the mind. Often it's a transformation of the heart, for example, as mentioned, when you've experienced a loss, that you first allow it, so in that case let it come up, that the emotion can also be released, that you're allowed to cry, that you may also feel pain. And so I can only say I am extremely grateful that I have learned the shamanic path in this particular situation, because there are indeed methods to allow these intense emotions to flow out more rapidly. This is what I have developed and expanded upon throughout the years, and it is possible that gradually, bit by bit, it surfaces. Additionally, it is crucial to rely on your soul to reveal as much as you are presently capable of handling and assimilating. Yes, and relinquish control to the soul, not your ego, not your mind. That is my most powerful tool. During these phases that I experienced, and at the beginning, as I mentioned, I was completely resistant, and then of course it was worse for me. However, upon learning to implement what I just told you about, it became much, much easier for me, greatly exceeding my expectations. And above all, of course, that there is trust that your soul desires to detach you from things that are no longer suitable for you. That you are currently at the point of starting a new stage of life that is beyond the comprehension of your mind, your ego, and your soul is desiring to get you ready for it. All the things that no longer align with this new phase of life will naturally separate, enabling you to examine them again without any resistance. And what can naturally also happen is that your environment naturally reacts to the fact that maybe your environment cannot cope with what you are going through, because we have all learned that it must quickly return to how it was before. It needs urgent care, see a doctor or go there, and it will return to normal like it was before. And that's not possible anymore. Maybe you have experienced something like this in your life as well. You have changed, so this transformation has begun, and then you listened to your surroundings or went back to the old field, tried to pick up your old life again. But what no longer worked, you felt it. I always like to say the energy is gone. That's not really you anymore. It's like living in the past, something you haven't been for a long time. That's how I would describe it. And then the process naturally continues, but at a slower pace. The worst for me was when I had this panic, this feeling that what came up seemed endless, that it would never stop. That was the frightening part for me. But if you simply have this calmness for yourself, this certainty that it will all pass, next week it will be different, then you can also handle it differently. And in that case, even seeking professional help, I can definitely recommend that there are people around you, whether they are psychotherapists or shamans who are knowledgeable about this energy or transformation, to help you live this path of transformation step by step. It's important to have support during this journey of self-discovery and growth. And your environment often cannot understand it because they themselves have not truly experienced it yet, and therefore your environment may not be able to provide you with the help you may wish for. But how long can such a phase last? I have experienced it myself, and it may have lasted between 3 to 6 months for me. But there are also individuals whom I have witnessed experiencing such a phase for a period of 1 or 2 years. And it simply depends on which mechanism is active within you, which resistance is active, how much accumulated energy or unprocessed emotions you have, how much you naturally then cling to your old life, defining yourself through it and holding on to it perhaps as well. And naturally, in whichever form, you also possess assistance that aids you in transitioning to the novel. And I have always described it like similar to when you depart from your previous life. On a suspension bridge, yeah, and on this bridge, and you know you can always go back. And that scares you, you have fog around you, you don't know what comes next, and you also have no drive to move forward in any way. You would prefer to go back to your old life because you know what you had, but you can't go back anymore. Your soul has already drawn you elsewhere, you feel it, right? And on the other hand, there's still nothing in sight. It's all gray, it's foggy, yes. And yet to keep going on this suspension bridge, in this transformation, yes. Still moving forward. And then over time, more and more, your new self-awareness takes shape, also connected to your new life, also connected to much more ease because all the heaviness you release during that time, and that is precisely this process of detachment, and then of course as well, a new depth in your life that you may have desired previously, but that you can also experience afterward, because the soul desires to guide you to your true self, and thereby also a newly experienced spirituality, so that you establish a deeper connection to your soul consciousness, because perhaps nothing else remains for you except to be receptive to these divine energies or to this soul consciousness, to be guided by a higher intelligence than your ego, than your mind. And if you then also allow yourself, it can also be, as I have at least experienced, my greatest gift was that in the moment when I could truly surrender, that is also a process. It is not just like I say, yes, I just surrender. It is simply practicing, and yes, I can only describe it like that. It is just a process that takes time. It requires patience and dedication to fully embrace. Then it is possible that you truly arrive in your soul, genuinely rest in your soul consciousness for a certain time, and can feel and observe your life from the outside as if you were watching a movie, experiencing it as though you were an external observer. And you are the actor yourself in it, while simultaneously you observe the film from the outside, from your soul consciousness, and can sense that what you are experiencing here, this embodiment, and therefore also your newfound self-awareness, or depending on which life then unfolds, that it is also a cosmic game, correct? That you do not become overly dependent on it any longer, as it may have been in the past. Because you no longer define yourself by it, because you have felt and experienced that you are this soul consciousness and are no longer attached to your ego, and can always transform your ego anew. And then it no longer becomes the dark night of the ego, but instead transforms your soul, thereby shifting your consciousness to the next level. And I have the feeling that at the present moment, this current time period we are going through essentially promotes these processes. And that is why I can imagine very, very well that many individuals are presently undergoing such a transformation. And it was also important to me to discuss this topic. Yes, it was crucial to emphasize that at the end of this transformation, a new life awaits you, holding exactly what you have deeply desired in your heart, what you may have seen yourself but also had fear of. And that was the mind that had fear before, or the mind could not let go of the old roles. And your soul now wants to assist you with that, to make it happen more quickly or at all, if you look at it from that perspective, considering the obstacles that may have hindered your progress in the past. Your soul is now eager to help you achieve your long-held desires. To be more specific, how do you emerge from this transformation, or how can you accelerate this process to some extent? These are the two things I have already mentioned. Let me summarize it again. Simply surrendering, not resisting, and remaining in a state of peace, and therefore opt to assume the role of the observer. And that is essentially the very first significant step in the process. I would like to offer you 2 affirmations that can be helpful when intense emotions arise and you may be struggling to deal with them. Take a moment to remind yourself and say, I surrender to the highest consciousness of my soul and give myself completely to it, embracing its guidance and wisdom. In this moment, you are connecting more deeply with your soul and trusting your soul. Or, I have faith in my highest consciousness within the soul. I have faith in my inner divine core, or wherever it desires to guide you. Exactly there that you say something like that, for example. Yes. And when it maybe goes more into this letting go, so when these heavy emotions are very active, you can maybe tell yourself, I release any resistance that prevents me from letting go of these heavy energies, or that prevents me from letting go or transforming all heaviness within me. These are positive statements that can be of great assistance to you in consistently strengthening yourself during this process. You are not your ego, you possess these emotions, but you are not defined by these emotions. Just so you are aware, they resemble massive clouds, similar to a storm approaching, a storm that has already come, and these clouds darken your view. However, these clouds will pass once again. These clouds will eventually go away, and your view will be clear once more. If you participate more in this, you will expedite this process. That is one thing. The other thing you can do is learn to change this perspective. And that is truly an active process. And that means now very specifically that if you feel like I am a victim, life is against me, and it is only getting worse, yes, so that is perhaps also something that comes up in the moment you step out of this perspective of negativity, that in that moment you actively try to change the perspective and focus your consciousness on everything will be fine, everything changes for the better, life is for me, my soul is working for me and wants to help me. What is coming up now? That it detaches itself from the negative mindset and embraces positivity. This is of utmost importance. And it can indeed happen that when you learn to change this perspective, as I have just described, the process accelerates, leading to a faster change that occurs more rapidly. And if you're stuck in this endless loop that everything is bad and so on, then this spiral can rather pull you further down, and these emotions can weigh you down more heavily or can be harder to detach from you. This is what I do not mean to become at this moment. I am aware that it is an extremely intense experience, and I understand that it is a process that involves changes at various stages. It is undeniably challenging, to the point where one might say it is easier said than done. I comprehend all of this, which is why I recognize that it is a time-consuming journey. However, it can be beneficial, and I sincerely hope that these tips will assist you in navigating through this process and potentially even bring you advantages or allow you to perceive it as a precious gift. Looking back, I can confidently say that I view it as the most extraordinary gift because it propelled me towards a completely new life that I could never have envisioned previously. I was once confined in my old life, bound by my previous emotions and thoughts, completely unaware of my true self. The experience liberated me in an immense way and shattered my old life, enabling me to reach a level of greatness that I never thought possible. I do not mean to sound arrogant, but rather to emphasize the profound level of love and depth that I have attained. And that's what's happening there, and I want to encourage you to go through this process well. Yes, and feel free to comment below the video, maybe also sharing your experiences to encourage others. Or if you were able to extract tips for yourself from this video to truly integrate it for yourself. Jan, if you like this video, please feel free to pass it on to others or share it with them. For more inspiration or insights into my daily routines, follow me on Instagram. The link is also in the description. Until next time, see you then. Ciao. Bye.